everybody, we've got a great video for you today because this is the brand new Mercedes-Benz GLE 450e. And usually I am not a fan of plug-in hybrids, but this is a car which has really turned me on to the idea. It's got some great features. Let's dive right in. So this is a GLE Mercedes-Benz, their medium-sized crossover SUV, luxury crossover SUV. It's actually the second most popular car in the lineup. Now in the past, there's been 4-cylinders and 6-cylinders and V8s and hybrids, but this 450e is the most capable plug-in hybrid yet, with a serious amount of EV range. And let's pop under the hood, see what makes this thing tick. All right, so this Mercedes-Benz is powered by 2 powertrains. That's right, so let's talk about the more conventional one. It's got a 248 horsepower 4-cylinder gasoline engine, but that has made it to a 134 horsepower electric motor for a total system output of 381 ponies. That's actually pretty decent power in this vehicle. Mercedes says 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, 5.8, which is pretty darn impressive. So when it comes to evaluating this Mercedes from a driving standpoint, we have to look at it in 2 different ways. How it drives as an electric vehicle and how it drives as an internal combustion vehicle, because of course it has both. The dynamic modes give us a bunch of different options for how we want to configure this vehicle. So we have sport mode, which is going to prioritize the gas engine. Hybrid mode, which is going to start by prioritizing the electric system and then using the gas engine when necessary. We've got a full electric mode, which is going to lock this vehicle in EV unless you're really trying to accelerate out in front of traffic, but that's going to really lock us in EV. And there's also a battery hold functionality, so if you're on the highway and you want to use gasoline when the gas engine is more efficient, and then if you want to use electricity in the city when electricity is more efficient, you can put it in the battery hold. And there's also an off-road mode as well, which is specific for off-road terrain, so lots of different modes, but we're going to start out in the electric mode. All right, so as you drive the Mercedes GLE 450e in electric mode, one thing which is interesting is the electric motor only makes like 134 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot on paper, but you get over 300 pound-feet of torque. And as Case behind the camera says, you buy horsepower, but you drive torque. And it's actually pretty decently acceptable in EV mode. You're not going to go jackrabbiting out in front of traffic. You're not going to be really overtaking trucks at highway speeds in the EV mode. And then if you really push hard on the pedal, it will kick on the gasoline mode because it thinks you're in trouble. But with the electric motor on, it's very clear in the pedal where the gasoline engine kicks on, because there's like a little switch, there's a little artificial switch, and then okay, if I go beyond this switch, it's going to kick on the gas engine. But the cool thing about this car in electric mode is I've had it up to 75, 80 miles an hour on the interstate, and when you drive around, especially from a stop, that was pretty good. One weird thing is the electric motor is sandwiched between the engine and the transmission, so you can actually feel it shift through the automatic transmission in electric mode, which is a little bit kind of weird at first, but then once you get used to it, it's pretty smooth and seamless. And then also sometimes I've noticed some of the programming is a little herky-jerky at slow speeds. It's weird not having the crawl torque converter in some instances. I actually appreciate that, but it's something you have to get used to. Now, because this car has both a gasoline engine and an electric motor, you can run it on both gasoline or electricity. Now, on electricity alone, this vehicle will operate for about 40 some miles on a single charge. We don't know the official EPA number because this car is still very early in its production cycle. We actually don't know the pricing either. But from our testing, 40 plus miles is very much realistic. It's got a 23.3 kilowatt hour battery and an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. You can plug in it at home at 11 kilowatts and fully fill up the battery in just a couple of hours. But this car also has a feature which I very rarely see on a plug-in hybrid vehicle, and let's run over to a DC charger and check that out. This Mercedes-Benz GLE has a feature I've never actually experimented with. You can not only charge this car at home on AC on level 1 and level 2, but it also has DC pins, so you can DC fast charge your plug-in hybrid. Now, this is a little bit unusual because the primary advantage of a plug-in hybrid is you let it charge up when you sleep, and then you get the EV advantage, but also the gasoline advantage when the battery dies. So I'm kind of struggling to find a situation where I'd want to regularly DC charge my plug-in hybrid, because unlike an electric car, if the battery's dead, I just run on gasoline. But for the sake of experimentation, let's see if it works, and let's see if I can be proven wrong. Now, this is a really early version of this car, by the way. We still don't know the final numbers on the pricing or the range. And of course, it's at 0% because the battery's drained. I've been running it on gasoline. 30 minutes left to 100%. So we've been at this charger now for 4 minutes and we've added 3.8 kilowatt hours to the battery. We are pulling 52 kW. Mercedes says that the GLE 450e is capable of up to 60 kilowatts peak, but we've been holding 52 now for quite some time. Well, we've been holding it for 5 minutes straight. Now, realistically, as the screen says, figure 0 to 100% charge time on a DC fast charger in a matter of probably 25 to 35 minutes, depending on the unit, which is pretty respectable. So I could see a world where, you know, you come to a shopping plaza like this, you go inside, you know, you get some clothing, maybe get some groceries, plug your car into a fast charger, and then you get those 40 some miles of range to cruise around in the city. Where I could see people getting pissed off is these EV drivers that may be waiting for a DC spot, and you've taken it up with your car that essentially still has a gasoline engine to drive you another few hundred miles. So there could be some tension there, but it is a nice piece of functionality to have. And it does open up some more options that you typically wouldn't find on a lot of standard plug-in hybrids. So even though the usefulness of this for a road trip, probably not needed around town, if you're in an area where you have a lot of Electrify America or, you know, fast charging stations, this is not a bad option. One other thing, Case, I want to point out. This EA has been a dismal of an experience. There are 4 stalls here. The far one is unavailable, it's broken. This one's derated, and the stall I'm in is derated. Only this guy in the iX is having a good charging experience. 1 out of the 4 stalls is working properly. Let's talk about the range numbers in this car. Now, nothing official yet. The EPA hasn't announced it, Mercedes hasn't announced it, but based on what we've seen on the European models, this thing should do 40 plus miles of range, like mid 40s is what most reviewers are thinking. From my experience, I think that's a little bit pessimistic. In real world driving, mixed city, highway, and country, I've pretty easily been able to get 50, 60 miles of range out of this 23.3 kilowatt hour battery, which I think is very good actually. And you know, that's on paper once again compared to a full EV. You're looking at like the Mercedes EQ products that'll do 270, 300. You're like, that's not very much. But then you got to consider you still have a gasoline engine which will take you several hundred miles and can be refilled like that. So I think 40, 50 miles of range in electric mode is more than enough. One thing I've really disliked in this car from driving it on electric is the regeneration setting. So you got paddle shifters, and when you're in electric mode, you've got 4 different settings. You got D+, and in D+, when you let off the accelerator, the car coasts like any other gas car. Doesn't regen any power into the battery unless you use the foot brake, and then it regens. There's also standard D, which when you let off the accelerator has just a little bit of charge into the battery. There's D-, which is as close as you can get to a 1-pedal mode. So when you let your foot off the accelerator, it puts more charge in the battery, will bring you, down closer to a stop. But it's pretty conservative for what I consider a 1-pedal mode. And then there's D Auto. And when I push and hold D Auto, what it does is it looks at the traffic in front of me. It uses its camera systems to realize what the traffic's doing in front of me and should slow down accordingly. It doesn't work very well. Ioniq 5, Kia EV6 have like a smart regen setting too, which monitors traffic. It works really, really well. This thing works super well about 40% of the time, and then other times it just seems like it refuses to stop with regen setting. So my favorite is D-, leave it in that. You still got to use the friction brakes or the foot pedal more than I'd like, but it's not bad. Now, the design of the GLE has aged very gracefully over the last couple of years. It's very swoopy, very aerodynamic, but in my opinion, it doesn't look nearly as jelly beany as some of the full electrics in their lineup, like the EQE and EQS. Some things worth noting: this grille is pretty cool with these individual little stars across the front. These multi-beam LED headlights do some really great features. They kind of fade on gently, and they're just very elegant. And then this car has some AMG features as well, like these 20-inch wheels with this black and silver finish. But what's nice is the 20-inch wheel by 2023 standards is actually pretty small for this category of vehicle, which means you have a nice chunky sidewall, and it gives this thing a great ride. Stepping inside the Mercedes-Benz GLE 450e. Now, this is a very nice interior. I think Mercedes, for the last few years, really has been knocking their interiors out of the park. The quality of materials, the craftsmanship, and the placement of the controls I find to be very intuitive. Let's go ahead and start this vehicle up. Foot on the brake, push the start button. It's going to default to electric mode because we have some charge in the battery. So, of course, we don't hear an internal combustion engine start up. But first of all, climate controls located here across the center of the vehicle. symmetrical, very intuitive, and they're these really beautiful toggles that you toggle up and down. Super easy to use, really enjoy that. Now behind the climate control, sliding this little tray open, you have a wireless charging tray, which works very well, very consistently, I found, on a bunch of types of phones. You also have dual USB-C ports, and then here you've got these cup holders, which can be made to adjust themselves for larger and smaller bottles. Little controller pad here for the infotainment screen. This dynamic control will actually cycle between the different drive modes. Little palm rest here. Button for the cameras, it'll pop up the cameras, and then we've got a split folding center armrest, which pops open. Good storage. Now from a screen standpoint, we're looking at dual 12.3-inch screens running the latest and greatest in MBUX, which is the Mercedes-Benz operating system. It works great. My dad is not super into the system because there are a lot of menus and sub-menus, but for the major controls, I find it to work very well. Wireless Apple CarPlay, super fast, very easy to access, a great system. Overall, it's great, and you can control the whole infotainment system by these little haptic systems here on the steering wheel. Once again, not usually a big fan of haptic systems, but I feel that Mercedes has done a great job incorporating all of the steering wheel controls in a way that makes a ton of sense. And you get another 12.3-inch screen for your gauge cluster, which is once again very vibrant and easy to understand. This one has a full panoramic sunroof with an opening functionality, so if you like to get some fresh air through the roof, that is an option. And the seat comfort themselves, I would say, very comfortable. This vehicle in particular is equipped with both heated and ventilated seats. Power seat controls located up here on the door. Okay, switching the car over to the hybrid mode. Let's see how it performs. Now in the hybrid mode, that little kick down artificial switch leaves the accelerator pedal, and then it just feels like a normal accelerator pedal, and it's much easier to kick on the gasoline engine. Now it still wants to prioritize electricity, but it's much more willing to kick on the gasoline engine. In hybrid mode, in the gasoline modes, this car is surprisingly quick. So 0 to 60 under 6 seconds, up here to mile above sea level. Any internal combustion engine is really affected by the altitude, and turbos help, superchargers help, but electricity is not impacted at all. In fact, electric cars get quicker because of thinner air density. And when you put this thing in, especially the sport mode, which is going to turn the engine on from a stop, when you floor it, the thing takes off really well because you've got a huge push of the electric motor, and then the turbo hits, and you got a huge push from that turbo, and 6 seconds feels very on the money with this car. The turbo engine is a little bit coarse. It doesn't have a great sound. I find that the standard GLE 450 with the inline 6 sounds a little bit better, but you know, kick down passing power is really good. And don't worry, if this high voltage battery is depleted, you don't really lose acceleration because it does keep a little buffer just for passing and acceleration. But overall, pretty good on gasoline mode as well. The biggest surprise for me driving this car around is actually the overall driving experience. I find to be extremely refined. The ride quality on this car is brilliant. It's almost floaty. Now, from a German perspective, you know, if I lived in a small town in the Alps and I was driving on these little twisty roads, I'd be like, this car is too floaty, and you can dial in the suspension, whatever. But from an American standpoint, where I just cruise, it's such a good ride. It's a much better, more compliant ride than the X5, I think, and I just love that it's about as close to an old school American floaty ride in a German car that I've experienced in a long time. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that this car has a really fat sidewall, but it's got a beautiful buttery ride. It's also very quiet in here. You dial in the adaptive cruise and you just go down the road with extreme comfort. So overall, guys, I'm actually, this is one of the first plug-in hybrids where I've been pretty impressed with this capability. You know, some of the early stuff I've driven 10, 15 miles of range, you know, on paper that's enough. In reality, it's just not. Then you've got like the RAV4, which will do 40, 45. That's actually a good number, and a lot of RAV4 owners I talk to, prime owners, never use their gasoline engine because that's enough for daily commuting. When you get into this vehicle, which in the real world, from my experience, 50, 60, it's pretty damn good. And then you've got that fast charging capability. So another great use of the fast charging is a lot of people don't have access to home charging, but a lot of people have access to public charging, right? Maybe you live in an apartment, you're going to Whole Foods, they got a DC charger, plug that puppy in, get a nice chunky charge, you know, while you're doing your shopping and stuff. So I really appreciate this car's capability and the refinement overall. There's a few things I dislike, like the regen braking. I just don't think it's very good, and sometimes we get some weird shifts every now and then. This is a very early production car, but overall, Mercedes has knocked it out of the park, and I like this car, especially based on styling, a lot more than their full electrics. It just looks a lot more normal. So far from what I've seen on the GLE, I'm very impressed with this 450e trim. I understand why so many people like the base car as a product. It just offers a ton of space and luxury for, someone who's looking for a luxurious SUV. And then the 450e, adds in some environmental savings as well as potential cost savings in the long run with the electrical architecture. Now, the big question for me is, what is this price going to be on this vehicle? We don't know. It's not been officially announced, but if I had to guess, starting at probably 78, high 70s, kind of in line with what the X5 plug-in hybrid is. Just sneak in under that $80,000 tax credit cap so you can apply for the $7,500 on the base car. It is assembled here in the US, but yeah, if you can pick one of these up for under 80, I think it's a pretty darn good car. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Big thank you to Case behind the camera. We'll see you in the next video.